Hello, my friends. Happy Tuesday to you. Welcome to your Tuesday Thought Twist. I am your life coach, Deb Penner. And this, of course, is our weekly opportunity to tune in and tune up your beautiful human brain. So last week we started talking about trauma. Specifically, last week we talked about the ubiquity of trauma, the fact that we've all experienced trauma. And that's important because if you have an unprocessed trauma operating in your subconscious mind, it is limiting you. So this week, I want to dive a little bit into how we can see where some of these things might be showing up in our lives. So sometimes we remember a traumatic occurrence, which is a gift, because if you have a conscious knowledge that you had something happen to you that felt traumatic to you, and remember, it doesn't have to be something that your adult conscious mind would label as traumatic. But if you know it happened, then you know where to start in terms of processing and releasing this trauma from your mind, releasing it from your body. But what if you don't? And so for those of us who are dealing exclusively with little t traumas, things that probably we don't really recognize as being particularly traumatic that happened to us a long, long time ago, what if you just don't remember? So I want to share with you two clues, if you will, two stones that you can turn over and look underneath where you may find trauma. The first one of those is what we commonly refer to as a trigger. And trigger is a pretty good name because a trigger is something that sets you off. And your response to a trigger is recognizable because it is out of proportion to the situation. So let me give you a couple of examples. Say that every time a friend who's coming to meet you is even a little bit late, you are so angry, it's like rage. Probably not proportional to the situation, right? Proportional might be irritated or concerned, maybe even a little confused, but not rageful, right? Another example is you get a new haircut or you try a new hairstyle and somebody makes a neutral comment about it. They neither compliment you necessarily, but they certainly don't degrade you either. They just say, oh, did you change your hair? Did you get a haircut? Something very neutral like that. And you just feel flooded with shame. So those are, excuse me, you guys, it's been very smoky. I live in Montana and it's been very, very smoky with wildfires here and I'm really feeling it today. So excuse me if I keep coughing at you. So those are some examples of triggers. So again, it's a situation, a happening, a person, a particular word, or maybe a pattern of discussion, and it fires you off. And your emotional response to that situation is out of proportion to the situation. You may even notice it's out of proportion. So for example, if we are looking at being rageful at your friends for being late, you're sitting there at the table at lunch and your friend is 5 minutes late and your emotional body is so angry, but your conscious mind is like, what? This is not a big deal. It's 5 minutes. Like she could have gotten stuck at a traffic light, or maybe she was on the phone a little longer than she meant to be at the office. And so you may even recognize this discord between your conscious thinking brain and your emotional response to something. Beneath a trigger, there is often a trauma. And another place where we can commonly find hidden traumas is in those areas in our lives where we would really like to make change, but we don't seem to be able to do so. So something that you have worked and worked and worked to change, but the change never sticks. Or a lot of times this looks like, I really do want the change. I know what I would like to have. I maybe even know what I need to do to get it, but I can't take action. I can't get started. So underneath those behaviors, patterns, actions, habits. I knew I was looking for another word, habits. Beneath those things that we are aware of and would like to change, but we seem stuck in, oftentimes there is a trauma. So that's a couple of places where you can begin to observe your life And maybe after what we talked about last week and now hearing this, you might even be starting to put the pieces together for yourself already. Like, oh, maybe that thing that I can't quit doing might be related to this thing from when I was a kid. So you might be starting to put some of this stuff together. And if you're not, that's okay. These are just really basic tools. There are not always traumas underneath some of these things that we talked about today, but it's a very common hiding place for them. So you might find them there. The other thing, excuse me again, the other thing that I did want to share with you this week was a reminder that if you have had big T trauma, you may want to do this kind of stone turning and exploration in the presence of a therapist. When we have had big T trauma and we don't remember it, that's a defense mechanism. That's your brain saying, not sure we can safely process this, so we're going to put it away like it never happened. And it can be very overwhelming to deal with that on your own. So if you know that you have had some big T trauma and you suspect there is more to be discovered, or even if you're not aware of big T trauma, but as you start thinking about these things, you begin to feel very overwhelmed or very uncomfortable, please do find a professional that can walk through it with you. Trauma is trauma, right? It's traumatic. So it can be very challenging to deal with. And a lot of times we need support through that process, which is completely okay. So just make sure that if you're feeling like you need that support, that you're getting it. I will see you back here next week. So now we've talked about the fact that we all have trauma and why it's important that we recognize that. We've talked about some of the places that you may find clues to trauma that you weren't aware of in your life. Next week, we're going to start talking about, okay, now what do I do with this? Right? So if I have trauma and now I know where to look for the trauma, what do I do when I find it? So that's next week. I'll see you back here. Take care of yourself until then.